Hello, this is Carl Forehand. I wanted to share with you today about the subject of why churches generally don't heal our trauma. I know that we think they do. I know that we intend for them to. I know we hope they would, but why generally they don't heal our trauma? Now, I know that because of relationships with people, sometimes people help each other heal trauma within a church. And I understand that. I understand that also. I understand that we've had good experiences in church that, along with the trauma, along with other things that have happened in the church that aren't so pleasant, things that didn't work out so well, maybe some things that aren't quite as effective as they should do. I understand that all of us have had good experiences in church. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in them or we wouldn't have been in them so long. Many things to be troubled about. There's many things that are challenging about church, but I understand that there has been some good things happen inside the walls of a church. There's no denying that. And you can't just say because there's been some problems that everything's terrible. I was just checking to make sure we're live, and it looks like we are. So, but what I want to talk to today is why generally they don't help heal our trauma and how we might could do better. So I want to just say my general statement would be then this before I get started, that generally churches do not heal our trauma. And that is a general statement, but I think it's generally true. So most of the time, the way that religious organizations are designed, they don't heal our trauma. And I would say right up front also, there's some contemplative groups that are doing quite well with trauma right now. And I could point you to some of those groups specifically, and I've been helped by those groups. But generally, religious organizations are not designed right. They're not doing what they should do. And I want to give you about 5 reasons why. So number one, the church schedules over our healing time. So if there was any time allocated, any time that we intended to heal people, to help them get healing from their trauma, we schedule over it. Most of the energy for a church or religious organization is in that Sunday time, or that time when they have mass, or the time, when you have synagogue or whatever it is. I don't know that much about other religions besides Christianity, but I know that most religious services don't allocate time for that one-on-one, that healing that needs to happen. Some of them may have small groups, but my question is, why not do that then? Instead of every week we're doing a Sunday show. There are events scheduled, there's educational things, there's projects, and all kinds of things that we work on in the church. And the general idea usually inside the church is that it's better to be busy. It's better to be doing the Lord's work and than spending time just talking, or maybe more importantly, listening. There's not enough time for that because it's scheduled over. All of the other things, especially the main attraction, the main show that goes on Sunday, most of the energy is put into that. If you talk about a church, a Christian church, especially a fundamentalist church or even a progressive church, most of that energy, that scheduling is geared around that main event that happens. So we schedule over the healing time. Number two, the church is not designed for honest dialogue. It's not designed in a way where we can have honest dialogue about things. We're ushered to our seats. The last church I attended was a fairly large church, and we would be greeted at the door by friendly people. Along the way, there would be people that would hand me a bulletin. I would walk into a climate-controlled theater, amphitheater kind of thing, auditorium, I guess is the word I was looking for. But there would be, from the time I walked in, including the pleasant music that was playing, the announcements, well orchestrated announcements on the board, that it was an orchestrated event. And that whole event had rehearsed movements to it. They weren't just winging it. And I've been to services where they were winging it, and that was, to me, that was way worse. Some people consider that better. But there were rehearsed movements to this thing. And generally, when you go to a church and you go through the movements, the mass, the service, the synagogue, whatever it is that you go through that rehearsed event. And at the end of that rehearsed event, you're satisfied. Why? You're satisfied because it creates a low-grade addiction to it. And so, but it's not designed for honest dialogue. And because it's not, I can't interrupt the service to have a discussion. Maybe I could spend 5 minutes in the coffee shop before or maybe after, but generally most of that energy is going towards that service that's not designed for honest dialogue. And so I leave with the same trauma I came in with. I'm coming to a church because I have this trauma, something I need addressed, but it's not designed for honest dialogue. Even if we have a Bible study or a teaching thing on Wednesday night or Sunday night, those generally are orchestrated also. There's a teaching, there's PowerPoint slides, and there's some question and answer, but it's really not the honest dialogue that I need to help heal my trauma. The other thing is that what we tend to do in religious circles, especially in Christian circles, is we bypass our trauma. Religion attracts people with trauma, as I've said before. And it wants to help them. It promises that it can help them. But then when people talk about their trauma, when someone brings something up, we generally get nervous. And when we get nervous, and uncomfortable, we start spouting platitudes. We start trying to ease them, comfort them real quickly. And we do that in times, when someone died, or when someone has this trauma they're trying to express. It makes us uneasy, and so we tend to bypass that with platitudes. God is in control. God needed another angel. It's going to be, God's going to work it out. He's got a plan for you, and we use these platitudes and bypassing type of language to get past it. When I started a contemplative kind of meditation prayer service, I had to really emphasize to Christian people that would come to this. When someone expresses something from their heart, just listen to them. Don't try to fix them. Don't try to give them an answer. Just listen. And it's really hard because we haven't been trained that way. We've been trained to bypass over things and have magic answers and have platitudes that satisfy us and get us out of that uncomfortable situations. That's a tendency that we, again, generally get into in Christian circles and churches. The fourth reason why church generally doesn't address our trauma is because it's an organization. Churches are organizations. We can say all the stuff like, the real church is people. It's not an organization. But the reality is that once you get over a few people, the church is an organization. It collects money. It has things that it does. It has things it has to preserve. It has salaries that it needs to pay. It has bills that it has to pay. It has a building it has to maintain, and all of those kind of things. 70% of the money collected and probably 70% of the energy goes into the staff and the building. And so In an organization, the organization comes first. And then within that organization, when people are hurt and their trauma doesn't get addressed, hurt people hurt people. People can help each other, like I mentioned before. They could get together and listen to each other and help each other with their trauma. But in an organization, it's not the priority. The organization is the priority. Leaders in church organizations seldom understand this problem well, and they also are dealing with their own trauma that doesn't usually get addressed, because who are they going to tell? They're good at meeting organizational goals. They're good at mission statements. They're good at the things that they're supposed to do. But generally, they're not good at healing our trauma. And in most cases, they don't really even understand it. So leaders are committed to organizational goals, and they're completing those. And usually they're doing them quite well. They're just not generally healing our trauma. Is that it may sound like it's not related, but they don't allow open theology. Organizations like churches have an agreed upon belief statement. Because they have a belief statement that they're committed to, that sets up an authoritative posture. Beliefs and questions are not usually encouraged. Different beliefs, alternative beliefs, questions, those type of things usually aren't encouraged. There's control mechanisms. We have confirmation classes, we have membership classes, and all of those are designed to control those beliefs. We don't like to think of ourselves that way. Churches don't like to think, well, we're controlling people or we're controlling our beliefs, but they are. And an organization has a vested interest in keeping things sort of the way they are and not going off on wild tangents. So they don't allow open theology or for us to think much for ourselves. Kind of demonstrated by the fact that one person teaches every week. One person is up there teaching, and even though we might have classes in different places at different times, there's one main teacher, and usually that teacher is okaying the rest of the instruction for the rest of the group. It's not just that we can explore things that might help us. That kind of bleeds into this idea that churches generally don't heal our trauma. When I feel different, and that makes me experience trauma. When I can't express my beliefs, when I can't explore my beliefs, I feel like there's something wrong with me. And so I subdue that. That becomes shadow and just another trauma thing that I have to deal with. People would say, well, I'm sorry that's your experience, but my church is better. I would ask you to honestly investigate that. Investigate whether your church really is different. And to do that, you might have to take a step back and step outside to really see it. That's what happened to us. And I would suggest, to address your trauma, seek out a trauma counselor that understands what trauma is like and how to deal with it, and start addressing your trauma with a professional, and then see whether or not your church is still a part of that, or might be causing that, or might be inhibiting your growth or your healing. Honestly, is my church helping it? Are they ignoring it? Or maybe are they making it worse? Someone challenged us to take a year off. And I never considered any of my churches to be traumatizing, but there was a lot of trauma that was induced over the years as I was a pastor for 20 years. So someone encouraged us to take a year off. When we did, now it's been several years. I'm not sorry. I don't want to go back. And I realized most of the services of the church could be replicated elsewhere for free. and I don't have to drive somewhere, and I don't have to go somewhere, and I don't have to pay money. So the church in general is an old, ineffective model. It started around the time of Constantine, 1500 years ago. We think we've evolved, but generally we still do things pretty much the same. We still have that one teacher model. We still have someone up front. We come to a building. We do all of those things that really aren't effective. So let me just say, the church is generally not effective at healing our trauma, and it's time for a change. It's time for the church to heal itself, and a lot of times that means we need to separate ourselves from it. Maybe you'll be led to go back in. I wasn't, and even if I was, Laura wouldn't go with me. So it's time that we address our trauma. I want to share this with you, and it's not, well, it is a commercial, but I wanted to tell you about my book, Being. Being was when my trauma kind of caught up with me. After 20 years of ministry, I broke down, and I'd call it a dark night or whatever, but I had to deal with my trauma. And I did that, some help from some Catholic nuns, Catholic sisters taught me a process called focusing. Later, my friend, Dr. Paul Fitzgerald, helped me walk through some of that and focusing, dealing with my shadow, dealing with my trauma. And then the second part of the book talks about going deeper with some of those things like fear and anger. And then the last part is learning to be. So it's called Being, a journey toward presence and authenticity. So it's real important to me. Then just recently, I released my novel, which is called The Hotel. And it's based on that hotel right there, which is in my hometown of Rockport, Missouri. And based on that hotel, kind of got my imagination running. And I went back to the 20s and 30s and imagined what it would have been like in that hotel, which is supposed to be haunted and supposed to have tunnels underneath the street and things like that. So I imagined what it would be like. And oddly enough, my characters in the book also went through transformations, like what I was talking about in the Being book. And so people have really been enjoying that book. It's somehow I came out with this is my first novel, but somehow it came out pretty good. And I'd encourage you to read it. All those are available on Amazon. But I encourage you, as I always do, to be where you are, be present, and be who you are, be authentic. And I wish you well.